we're going to talk today about personal agility, and it's going to be very hands-on. That's why we're using this tool. So I don't even have a deck. I pulled together a ton of stuff from lots of different ways that people have expressed and shown how to bring Agile, particularly Kanban, into your personal life. And there's some interesting tips. And then about 5 years ago, some friends at Modus actually wrote a book called Personal Agility. Personal Kanban, sorry, that's the book. And so I thought that, it's a great book. It's a great source for people who are, maybe you're watching this video and you're not able to be in this session, or you do this session and you want to go further. So a lot that I've done in this session is reflected through that book, because I just like to have a source for people to reference after the workshop. But I use this in my personal life. My husband uses it. I've kind of spread this a lot to a lot of my friends, and I was laughing one day because I heard my husband explaining Kanban to the neighbor. So I thought, oh, well, my work is done. We talk a lot about Scrum in Agile, and that's great. We have a team converging on a goal, but Kanban brings us a lot of flexibility. And as you probably know, in Scrum, we pull a lot of the Kanban principles into Scrum. So now we're just going to practice this in some of our personal life. So let's get started on this canvas. Hopefully you're seeing the same thing I am. And just as a little tip, you can come into saying getting started. That'll bring you to this upper left corner. And so we're just going to work on a few things here. First, let's just do some connection. I'd love to hear a little bit from you guys. Think about a time when you had a lot of demands. Maybe you looked at your work calendar and it was back-to-back with meetings. And then whether you are working remotely or in an office, you moved into your personal life and it felt like the same thing. It was just constant stuff that you had to do. Has that ever happened? Is this only me, or does anybody else ever feel that way?
I think that happens many times, that you feel overwhelmed.
So let's check in. It probably is pretty common. So let's go ahead and do a little check-in. How do you physically and emotionally feel when you're in that state? Let's put a couple of notes about how we feel when we're in that state, and also what's the impact. So one of the things that happened to me, which was quite embarrassing, I was just in that state where I was a victim of my calendar, and I was trying to do everything and meet everybody's expectations, and I was fitting in, chores like going to the grocery store while my kids were in activities, and I always felt like I was going to forget something, and I did. I forgot my own child who was at his karate class. And even though it wasn't very far away, it was a long time getting to him in traffic, and it was very scary for him. He was young at the time. It was embarrassing for me, and I just was really torn up about it. I was really upset about it. I wanted to be, all things to all people, but that anxiety and distraction really ended up impacting my family. So let's hear from some others. Let's go ahead and put some stickies on here, and let's talk through, like, how do we feel? What's the impact? So you can add some stickies, but let's also talk. So when we have our recording later, it's of some value. Anybody want to go off the mute and just talk about it?
So for me, at times when there's a lot on my mind, it's difficult for me to sleep, and that in turn affects my work the next day, and I'm crying for sleep at times.
Yeah, that's a great one. And lack of sleep actually affects your body just like drinking does. So it can really affect your cognitive reasoning and your emotional state, as well as your physical state. That's a great ad. Anybody else want to share?
Probably you feel a bit overwhelmed, Julie, that with so many things up in there, you're trying to juggle, right? We're not natural multitaskers, and you feel you're not giving enough attention to anything. You feel frustrated, you're losing focus, anger, and all of that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Has anybody done something drastic, like quit their job or done something big like that just because you're feeling like it never stops? Has that ever been an impact?
We I tend to lose contact, and I feel like I'm not able to contribute much to my family or my personal time, because when we are tied up so many things, I get so we lose some very beautiful moments of our life. That's what I feel it, right?
So true. Absolutely. In India, do you guys have a lot of conversation happening around what they're calling the Great Resignation? Is that a
Yes,
phrase? Yeah. Is it a big impact there where a lot of people are changing jobs or resigning from jobs because it's not necessarily aligning with what they want to do, or it's not giving them that balance that they're seeking?
I
I
think it's
think
because
recently that has been quite something that is very much discussed even in the newspapers. Like people at some point of their age and after some experience, they realize that this is not probably the place where they should be, and they start looking for opportunities where they do better.
Yeah.
How about
Yeah,
that?
and it seems to me, I think the pandemic has made it all worse, right? And it seems like, well, some of us don't have to travel into the office now. In some ways, it might be easier, but sometimes some of us find that we were even working more because we weren't traveling, we weren't separated from our desk. Has anybody ever had that impact in the last couple of years? It's been almost 2 years now. We're dealing with the pandemic.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, I
yep.
think because of that, the 9.5 hour work has gotten into like a 11 or 12 hour work day.
Yes, and I
Even
feel
more than,
like, go ahead.
even more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's almost more difficult in some ways to switch our role from professional to personal, because we're in the same. A lot of us are in the same space. I live in a very small house, about 850 square feet, which is small in American standards. My husband and I love it, but it does. There's really very limited ability to physically move from my professional role to my personal role. So I had to reconnect on some of the things that we're going to talk about today because I felt like it was just my professional life was consuming my personal life. Any other comments about how we feel and why we might be wanting to look for different ways to organize our time and our talent? These are great ones.
I feel guilty of being a bad parent sometimes. As much as we try to be as more organized than ever, but I feel there's not enough time to do everything we want to do. So, yes, you dropped the ball many times.
Yeah, I agree. I felt like that was the part that affected me the most. It's been some times, and my kids are grown now, but some of those things really affected me emotionally, which is one of the reasons I really went on this journey, in the to bring a little bit more order into my life. So let's move down a little bit. I'm going to move down in here to our little gauge. You can see that, and I'm going to summon you. So you're going to jump over to where I'm at. And I got introduced to Kanban a little bit later than I did with Scrum. I remember in 2009 being at a conference in Chicago, and people were talking about the Kanban guys and the Scrum, and we had this little competition. I didn't even know how to say it. I didn't know if it was Kanban or Kanban, but it's always intrigued me because I really love process improvements and flow. And so I do have a lot of experience. I'm actually not certified in Kanban. I have something like 25 certifications, and I've not been certified in Kanban. So I am not an expert, but I do have a lot of experience. So I put my experience rating really high over here, because I feel pretty comfortable with the principles and I've applied them in different ways. We're going to have some lingo that's sort of Kanban lingo, and we're going to talk about how the principles of Kanban apply to personal agility. So I just want to check in on your experience with Kanban so I know if I need to pause and explain more things, or if there would be of interest if we did even more of these types of things. So go ahead and put your name on anywhere on this scale that represents your knowledge and experience with just regular Kanban. So while we work on that, any relevant sources that you have, that particularly those of you who've maybe used Kanban in your personal life, go ahead and drop them anywhere down here in our bookshelves. Now, I put sort of the standard Kanban books over here. These are just the regular Kanban books are pretty common in the industry, but there's a couple videos over here. There's personal Kanban, which is this workshop is heavily inspired by this book. So if as we talk and you have some interesting sources to share with each other, just go ahead and put them here. So if you bring in a link, these are links from Mural, they'll show you this little image, right? And then somebody can double click on them. And what I'll do is when we get done with this class, I'll make sure that the URLs are available in our meeting notes. All right, so those of you who have some experience with Kanban are going to recognize some of the things here as we talk about personal Kanban. I had a little, just a list, a little agenda, and then I was rereading the book, preparing for this workshop and looking for some fun videos. And I remember that the founder of the author of the book, he actually used to use a lot of mind mapping. So this is a mind map. Has anybody ever used mind mapping?
I think we have started using mind map in our project, but we have not used it in personal life anytime. At least I haven't.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool. When you used it in your project, did you enjoy it? Did it help you?
It does. It does help in both grouping together flows and making sure we are not missing anything out. It acts as more of a tracking plus planning tool in one.
That's nice. It's a visualization, right? It's just a way I like to take my notes now if I'm interviewing somebody, like in the product world, or I'm thinking about a presentation, or I'm going to write an article for my blog. I like to start with mind mapping because it organizes my thoughts. And I start to see, you could even go further if you were just visualization. You could draw lines where things connect. So I was thinking about this workshop and I was thinking, how can I take all this great information and bring it down to 2 hours and also leave some room to make it actually interactive? So we're building our own boards. And I just started with some main themes that I feel like not just the book, but these other aspects that we're bringing into this workshop cover. So in personal Kanban, there's really only two rules. There's two principles. If anybody who's familiar with Kanban, let's look over here. So Renjith, do you remember how many principles are in Kanban that we might use in software development or lean manufacturing?
So basically make work visible, limit your work in progress, have flow basically. And then probably some sub principles could be that, bubble up your bottlenecks in the process basically. So these are some things that we have tried.
Nice. And do we inspect and adapt?
Yes.
Yeah. Why?
That's the fundamental to your Kaizen or continuous improvement. Without that, you're going to be stuck in one place. Nice.
All of those principles apply here. They've called them different things. A lot of times it's not written in Kanban language, right? They should feel very familiar if you're familiar with Kanban, and they should feel logical. So they really focus on two major elements of Kanban: visualizing your work and limiting your work in progress. It's interesting. They seem easy, but they're both kind of difficult to do. In order to do both of those things, we have to do things like categorize so that we have some ways to visualize our work that sort of makes logical sense. And we have to learn how to prioritize everything that we're doing, everything that we're asked to do in order to limit it. So just want to pause here and give you a chance to read through some of these things. What have you, any questions on what we've talked about so far? What about this phrase, activity management versus time management? Has anybody ever heard that phrase?
Probably trying to prioritize between the different activities that you've got to do.
Yeah, I like this phrase. I think it's David Allen who wrote the book, Get Things Done. I think he's the one who coined activity management. We often call it time management, But in reality, it's not managing time because we all have the same amount of time. It's really around managing the activities. What's the best use of our time? And then this next one should feel pretty common, breaking big items into smaller items of value. Anybody want to talk about that and how we see that enacted every day?
That's our incremental development, right? We create small chunks of user story, which can generate value independently.
Yeah, and so we practice that same thing in personal Kanban. We want to break big items into small things, but they have to be valuable, right? Just making them small, doing a piece of something, just like in software development, it could cause waste if we have to, pull tools out and everything. If we're doing a project and we do a small little item, we pull all of our tools out. If it's too small, what we're trying to do, we either have to leave our tools out or we put them back or have to get them back out. So we're not trying to break things into small pieces just for the virtue of being small. We also want to practice this idea of getting them in something of value. So it's a little bit more flexible when we talk about it than we do with Scrum, because we're not necessarily looking to get it all the way to done. We're looking at what is the next good decision point or what's the next natural pause. So there might be tasks that we do that have a dependency on something else. Imagine making an appointment with someone. You might have to leave a message and then they will call you back. Until they call you back, you're a little bit dependent on waiting for them to call you back. It's not like our work life where we go and we have somebody going and removing those impediments. So we might take that item and break it up into, making the appointment and then having the appointment. Those would be different ways to, simple example, breaking some things up. And then just like with Kaizen, we use reflection to think about what have we learned about our own world. It's a very independent thing about what's most valuable to me as a person in both my professional role and my personal role, what's important to my family, what's important to my long-term goals, and that could be very independent. What's important to me could be very, very different for you. So your personal Kanban should reflect that. It's very much around your individual goals. And when we talk about categorizing, we're going to talk about how to make things visible. It seems a little easier, but especially if we're using Scrum, to think about project-based items, but they've got some really interesting ways to work on visualizing recurring tasks, things that we want to do every day that we also want to leave, make sure we represent, and we don't want to have, 1,000 stickies for all these repetitive tasks. So we're going to go over that method as well. Any other questions? This is essentially the agenda for our couple of hours here today. Any other questions or comments on this?
Okay.
We're going to jump into an exercise where I want you to look at a couple of different boards, and I just want you to discuss in your small group. And Ranjit, they're going to figure out how to do the breakout rooms here in Teams. So if anybody has any suggestions, you can help us both, because I think we're both new to
Doing
Teams.
that as we speak.
Oh, so you're going to have to give me a lesson afterwards. I know how to do it in Zoom, but not in Teams. So
Yeah.
I want you to just, we're not going to explain these boards to you. I want you to spend some time in your group, and I want you to see what these boards tell you just by being an observer. I want you to bring your own interpretation to what you see. And as you look at things, I want you to add some stickies down here about your observations on each board. So let's do one observation together. If I were looking at this board, I've got a persona up here that tells me about the person whose board this is. This is Ada's board. She's a parent of 2. She works, but she's also getting a certification so she can go further at work. So she's one of those people that just her schedule is packed. She's super busy and she's trying to stay on top of everything. So she created this personal Kanban board so that she could make sure she has a balance with both her family and her study goals. So if we were to look at this, just anybody give me any first impressions.
It's a plan. I mean, it's a home plan. I mean, for a week or like for a day, rather.
Yeah. So she's got some things happening, basically showing her whole week at a glance. Would you agree?
Yep.
That's a great one. So that's all you're going to do is look at the board, what the board will tell you, think about how it's structured, and put some observations on there, just like that. Let's skip over here. We're going to do one more together before we get into our groups. So this is a different persona, and every group has the same 2 personas, the same 2 boards. This one is Hari. He is in sales. You can imagine he's kind of a hard hitter. He likes sales. He likes, he's an extrovert. He has a lot of energy. So he loves what he does, but he also really loves historic architecture. And he volunteers for his local historic society. So he's very goal oriented. He's a very visionary person. Interesting because he loves history. And he has lots of ideas of what he wants to do in his life because he would just love to be able to combine his professional role and his personal role. But he's a hard hitter and he's always busy. He also had a pretty serious health scare, and his doctor has warned him he has to really pay attention to his fitness. So he created this personal board so that he could balance all of his many ideas and all of his goals. So let's do one observation together. What's one thing that you observe on this board?
I think he includes both his personal as well as his official work, right? In this board. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. What has he done in this visualization between his personal and his professional role? What's something visual that we
Quite
notice?
detailed, I feel.
One more time.
He's quite detailed in what he's
he's pretty
visualized.
detailed. And do you also see that he's using some colors to combine some things that are connected?
Priorities, yeah.
Yeah, and look, his historic stuff is all blue, and his professional stuff looks like it's gold. And then his fitness stuff is green, and then he's got this other goal about podcasts. So he's using a different format, and he's using color. So those are the types of examples. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. There's a lot to learn on these 2 boards, so really examine them and just put all of your thoughts around the board. Let's check in with group 1. Tell us about somebody, we can read your stickies, but tell us about some of the interesting things that you observed.
Anita, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So from the first board, we actually saw how she's limiting to what's work in progress. And she has made a very detailed plan of certification study where she has divided into 5 sections, and those 5 sections have to go through all the stages, read materials, and then finally reaching out to ready for final. And then for kids, she has another checklist which she has created on a weekly basis.
Nice. So what is this number 1 under certification study? What do we think that's telling us? This 1 WIP.
Section 2 is work in progress.
Yeah. So what she's giving herself 1 work in progress, meaning she has to get all the way through a section before she picks up another one. So if we look at section 2, that says ready to retake the section quiz. Does she have that reflected above in her tasks?
Yes, it's ready.
It's
ready.
So options is something as a backlog, and then once she plans for that and refines it, it goes into the ready state, and then it is being picked up in so and so date.
Nice. Any other observations that your group wants to pull out on this one?
She has a retro board where if you see lesson learned, she introspect and I think adopt. There's a board on the right side.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think she has set up. Okay, I think that's something which we wanted to add it.
Yeah, when she makes it visible down here, all of these things she has to do with her kids, we notice that she never quite has time to check their chores, right?
Yeah, check
so
course.
If we look at her visual, and that's the purpose. This is what's important to her. She's showing all of the work that she's doing, and she's looking and she's saying, look, I have a pattern. I'm not able to get to the chores. So Maybe there's somebody else in her household who can help. Maybe her parent lives there, maybe her husband or partner, or maybe she has some help, right? But essentially, she's learning that she needs to ask for some help when she doesn't have the time to review the kids' chores. Any other observations you guys want to pull out? Team 3 says too many checkpoints, too detailed. Tell us about that. Is this
Yeah,
too
we felt
detailed?
that, yes, we felt that it was too detailed. And also, is it actually possible to go ahead and, mark these items and do this regularly? Like if you see, we have today and then doing and then pen, are you able to really put down these, in
Yeah,
these columns,
that's really the point, right?
like on a
At the
regular
end,
basis?
yeah, at the end of every day or the beginning of the next day, you're coming in to your personal Kanban and you're making your updates. If you don't want this kind of detail on your board, you don't have to. But in this instance, she has what we call 2 different value streams, multiple value streams of these recurring tasks. Her certification study and her kids, these are these recurring tasks. If she made a sticky, a regular Kanban with a sticky for all of these, she would have a ton of these little stickies and we wouldn't know what to do with these recurring tasks. So these are called value streams. And her certification study has a path that of working through each of the sections. But the kids, that's like a checklist of stuff. So this is a way to reflect, what she's doing on a daily basis, but also these recurring tasks that don't always have to be reflected in individual notes. And then somebody mentioned there's a retro board here. So different books or different things call these different things, but that's essentially what it is. You're inspecting and adapting that Kaizen event that Ranjith mentioned. Let's stay on board 1 and let's move down here. Team group 2. We saw some things from 1 and 3. What are some things that you guys observed?
Yeah, I think one of the things was that she had the column for the pending item, which was she had made an appointment, or she had called out the plumber but was still waiting for a response. She had broken down her certification activities that are necessary quite significantly. And one other thing was that uh, to manage her kids' work or kids' activities, with all the repetitive tasks that she'll need to do on a daily basis, she had made a plan for the entire week.
Nice. Yeah, so this was a new thing, this idea of what the book calls the pen, right? So this idea that you've gone as far as you can with something, you're waiting for that to come back. Now, there's a man named David Allen. He has a body of work called Getting Things Done. Has anybody ever heard of that book or the work that he's done, David Allen? He's another sort of time management person, a lot like Stephen Covey or these guys who wrote this book about personal Kanban. So David Allen has a bunch of stuff. He's really known for his time management, his activity management. And one of the things that he suggests is that when we get all of these things happening in our head, there are all these open loops. So when we have these open loops and we lay our head down on the pillow at night, sometimes those open loops keep spinning. Does that ever happen to anybody? Does anybody start thinking about all the stuff they have to do when they are laying down trying to go to sleep, or they wake up thinking about everything that they have to do?
And then you invariably not do anything, just
Yeah.
procrastinate.
Yes. So his body of work really encourages writing it down using some kind of system like this, because once you get it into a list and once you start managing your activities, you're able to close that loop because you know that you've done what you can, right? So the plumber's going to call back and then they can move another sticky and she can decide what she has to do today. And it's also thinking about blocking your time. If we take a look at this, in this instance, she's got to take her, looks like maybe her daughter, to the dentist. Looks like they're going to be out. They're going to be out, so she's going to go to the market. And so we can infer that she's probably blocking her time. So she doesn't have to do things, make a trip twice. She's combining going to the dentist with maybe going to the market, before or after. So she's grouping activities so that she has a little bit more control over her calendar. And those are some other techniques from David Allen where he's saying, make some groups of things on your calendar where you're reducing your context switching. Right? Because that would be frustrating to take your kid to the dentist and then you get all the way back home and then you've got to run back out to the market. We're assuming it's a regular dentist appointment and her daughter doesn't have to have oral surgery. So there's a lot of benefits by figuring out formats that work for you and the level of detail that works for you, and by visualizing. We talked about this lessons learned, and we're visualizing what's happening here. She's recognizing some patterns and it's visible to others as well. Right? Does everybody see that? So let's look over here at this one and let's stay on group 2 since I'm down here. What are some bigger, some observations we've made on this one?
Yeah, so the bigger chunks, like the ones you see in the future and progress, these things he has like a bigger goals, like publish a blog about historic architecture, which is a bigger piece. So that he's broken down into sensible, smaller ones that probably he can work out during the week. So that's one thing that was a nice one to see. And also he's given equal amount of importance to fitness, and he's tracked it really well. Like if he couldn't do it, he couldn't do it. If he's done it well, he's given a good feature as well. I mean, good review also as well on that. So that's what we thought was good in this.
Nice. Yeah, great observation. Yeah, if he had one sticky up here and it said write a book, what would happen? Would he ever see any movement?
No, that would have just been probably a dead end, because what to start with the book? Like there's so many things that you need to prep to start a book, and then in between, and then after closure of a book. So I think it has to be divided in such a way that he can give equal time. I mean, slot it according to time chunks, so that the work can still be done, instead of saying write a book in a day, which is not possible. So
Yeah, and he's got a lot of ideas, right? So he's one of those people that has got all these big goals, but if he just put those big goals on there, it's just going to feel overwhelming because he's not going to see any progress. It's just going to look like these big goals and they just kind of hang out. And there's something really magical about moving the stickies, which you guys probably have noticed with your Scrum team. Everybody loves to move the stickies. We all love to be able to pull things over to done, but it also helps us to manage our time realistically. So not everything is represented in his, week on the board, because he's looking at what he can do today and also maybe some things that might take multiple days to do. So he's prioritized the stuff he's going to do today plus other stuff that might have multiple steps. Right. And so there's some magic around being able to see that movement, and it's your board. You get to change it and move it how you want. So there's also some magic about showing everything that's done. What do we know about looking at this? What does it feel like when you see a list of stuff that is accumulating all the stuff that you've done? How might that feel?
Sense of
Sense of accomplishment.
accomplishment.
Yeah, it feels good. And when we're overwhelmed and we have all this stuff coming at us, we forget to make note of all of the accomplishments that we did do. So you can figure out how long you want to keep your items in done. Maybe you clean it out every week, maybe you leave them for a couple of weeks, but that's something that you get to figure out. But there's some value in showing yourself all of the things that you've done, that you've finished. That's just one of those psychological aspects of these boards. So let's move up here and let's hear from our other groups. What did you all observe? I'm going to pull up some of these here. Anybody want to talk us through a couple of observations?
Yeah, he has this gentleman, he has a bifurcation on task. He had made the things, into he had made sizes. I mean, small, large,
Yeah,
into the sizes. Yeah,
right. Good.
and yeah, and one he maintains a backlog. That's another thing. Where he has an items, which is, as soon as the options, basically the options, which is a backlog where he whatever comes into his mind, basically, to help him out, he's actually adding it up. Only when things are ready, so he moved into the ready and start working on it. And future in progress, again, what we see is, like, there are three items which is, like, there is a whip limit. He has set it up, so he'll have 100 things in the future in progress, but he is concentrating only on these three things, and there is a whip limit which he's kept it. And one difficulty which one of our team member, we shared, is like, we don't, when you look at this plan, we don't really be able to understand which day are we in. When you look at this board, we don't know, which day are we in. I mean, are we in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or like which day? So
Yeah.
probably we'll have to, that's one difficulty we had.
Yeah.
Mm.
We're gonna just assume that we're at the end of the week. We're showing the whole week.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think that's
So
what.
if you were looking at this, right, let's just say that it's Friday night and you're looking at your board. We don't have anything on Saturday. What might you recognize about this fitness value stream? What was happening in the last few days of the week?
He would have got little too much into the other side of the work. I mean, work side. He would have got, overloaded. Then he couldn't do this, but he was tracking it, that he is not able to do it. But then on Saturday again, he got back to the personal work. I mean, like, this fitness work.
Yeah, and so when we have these repetitive things, these are called value streams, and we're marking the detail that's important to us. It could just be a checklist like it is with the kids. In his information, he's added a little bit more detail. And again, it's your personal board. It's how you want to do that, and so you get to add the detail that's important. But when you're looking at this, you can see a pattern of your own behavior. And so he might recognize that Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, he looks like, this was slipping for some reason. So he might do his own personal reflection, and, maybe he does something different on those days, or maybe he'll change his whip limit so that he makes sure that fitness can stay a priority in his life. One of the things I saw up here says find online yoga instruction. So maybe attending the yoga, he's recognized that he just can't get out of the house to go to attend yoga. So he's going to find something online. So maybe he's already done some retrospection because he's able to see these patterns and he's looking for ways that he can, meet his goals. So these are a couple of different methods. You can tell they are not the same. We have a lot of flexibility when we just do it visually. If you're just using stickies in your board at home, you can do it on a tool like this. Obviously, these boards have a lot of freedom to set them up the way that you want. And I really encourage you start with, something physical, analog, so that you can find a format that works for you. You can see how different these are. My husband and I, we have some sticky notes on the fridge. I always have my whole world is, got sticky notes everywhere. I've got stuff behind me because it's such a powerful thing to visualize our work. So any other questions or comments on these design patterns? Sometimes it's hard to figure out what goes on our board, and we want to spend a little bit of time talking about prioritization. So I'm going to summon you. You're going to come to number 4 to what we call activity management. Now, what is this number 1440? Anybody know what that number is?
Is that the number of minutes in a day?
Yes, very good. We all have the same number of minutes in the day. Everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're a media star, a movie star, a president, a prime minister, an agile coach, a scrum master, a developer, a product owner. We all have the same minutes in the day. And so that's really the focus around learning how to manage our time and talent. So this is a technique that comes from Stephen Covey, that it's talked about in the personal Kanban book, but it's also used in all kinds of time management systems. Has anybody ever seen this quadrant before? Or used this quadrant before?
Not with the terms, Julie, but yeah, heard
But
this.
yeah,
Like,
similar,
yeah,
similar.
Great. I'm going to show you just a really short video that explains this quadrant, and then we're going to do this exercise where we're going to move these options over into this quadrant just to get comfortable with these 4 different areas. All right.
In the 1920s, a college professor suggested that everything we do in life falls into one of 4 categories. The actions you take are either important, they contribute to your vision, mission, values, objectives, strategies, and high priority goals, or they're not important. The actions you take are either urgent, there is an implication of time pressure, or they're not urgent, there is no time pressure. Quadrant 1 is important and urgent. Your biggest client has a pressing need. The computers crash. You have a deadline-driven project you need to complete. Quadrant 1 items get done. Quadrant 2 items are important and not urgent. Think about it. Everything you do that improves the quality of your work and your life is in Quadrant 2. Improving relationships, personal development, seizing new opportunities, developing and empowering others, problem prevention, preparation, and better planning are all in Quadrant 2. They're important, but they're not urgent. Quadrant 3 is not important, but implies time pressure. There's urgency, and it's deceptive. It may feel like it's important, but it's just urgent. Many emails, phone calls, and meetings are not important. They don't contribute to your vision, mission, values, objectives, strategies, and high priority goals. Quadrant 4, it's waste and excess. Here, there's no time pressure, but you might find yourself lost on the internet doing things that are not important. That's Quadrant 4. Many time wasters and escape activities are in Quadrant 4. The principle is simple and profound. What matters most matters most. So spend more time in Quadrant 2. How do you do that? You plan for it. Your dynamic business growth plan is now leading you and your team to identify important priorities. By setting a priority, you're taking something that is important and making it urgent by identifying a completion date.
About that. Seems simple, but I want to I'm going to use this little exercise around these people that are getting ready to move. My husband and I just moved, so it's kind of fresh on my mind. And let's pull these over. We are down in number 4, activity management, and anybody can just pull over an option and put it in one of these quadrants and just start pulling them over where you think they go. Manage, quadrant 1, that's important and immediate. If you don't do them, there's going to be unpleasant consequences. Things that you feel like are things that could be planned for that are very important. And then the bottom, things that maybe you could delegate, avoid, or reject doing. So let's just pull them over on your own. Anybody can pull any of them over. And then if there's anything that any of you have moved recently and you want to add some others, or you have some good examples to share with others, you can add your own. So now let's look at the way that they are in these quadrants. And let's see, does anybody disagree? Does anybody want to talk about them or move any of them? Like if we look at this bottom left, is there anybody, if we didn't do these, does
Like,
anybody disagree? Go ahead.
Fitness goals is important.
Okay, where do you think it should go?
It should go to the right top quadrant.
Let's go ahead and move that. Now, somebody else thinks it's not immediate or important, and that would be okay, right? If it's important to you, if it's part of your goal, then it would go in that upper right quadrant because you could plan for it. Just like in those Kanban boards, you're finding a way to bring it into your regular day-to-day. What are some other things that people might disagree with? Move that over.
The writing an article about moving, that is neither important nor immediate right now, right?
Yeah, so move that over. Now, if you were a travel agent and your brand depended on you writing that article, would that change the way that you feel about it?
Yes, that would become important then.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. What are some other types of distractions that show up in our lives? Anybody have any examples?
Buy new furniture for new place. Uh, basically, you are not very sure about, how does it, this fit, what do you have it fits in the new place. Probably that's not very important. I mean, it's actually a waste of time to think about that at right point of time.
Yeah, you can move that down for now. You could close that loop, not deal with that for right now, right? And
Yep.
so this is another thing that happens. We are great solution providers, and we start thinking about all of these things, and then once it gets in our head, we start thinking about it, and we might think we have to make a decision about it. I'm going to use something that I hope isn't true for you. I do a lot of mentoring and coaching, and people will come to me when they're looking to change careers or change their jobs, and they'll talk about changing jobs and interviewing, and they'll talk about it as if they have to make the decision. Well, I'm not sure if I want to leave. I don't, if this happens, if that happens, but they don't even have a job offer. So one of the things I tell them is like, it's not a decision until you have a job offer. So we don't have to make a decision until the last possible moment for that. So we want to close some of those loops because we're spending a lot of our mental capacity on things that we don't have to decide right now. Now, if we did this every week and we looked at everything in our list, maybe something that's in that lower quadrant might need to be moved up. Does everybody see how that might change over time? Would buying furniture change over time? Or announcing that to your family and your close friends that you're moving? Would that change over time?
Good.
Yeah, so we want you to do this every week. As you set up your personal Kanban board, think about all of the activities that you're doing and what has to happen for that week so that you don't need to put everything on your board that you're not going to do right now, right? You can stick them in your options, but it could make your board pretty cluttered. And every week it might change. So just like we coach in Scrum to keep our backlogs realistic, right? Don't just make them, hundreds of items that get lost in the list. Really think about what's relative and true and current. So, it's a great way to think about things that don't have to be done right now that might change and how we can remove some waste. And then this idea of, what we might do to escape. I put this one on here, research for the truth about the latest scandal and gossip. So obviously you would know that, I live in America, and when President Trump was in office, there was so much on social media that I would spend a lot of time every day trying to figure out what was true, what was real and true about what was happening. And you can't find the truth. You just get into a rabbit hole of going down through all this social media and all these links, and I was just wasting a lot of time. It was just something I needed to stop avoiding. And so that was just something I caught in my own personal Kanban. I was just spending too much time. And so I just started following some different news channels. I started following BBC and some other channels that would give me objective opinions, but I didn't spend my time going down these rabbit holes. So there are some things that might change as you start to look at your own Kanban, your personal Kanban, and then really revisiting what's important and true and relevant for you. Like this one, announced to family and close friends, that might have unpleasant consequences if you don't tell them, if they find out about it from somebody else. Depends on your family and friends, right? If you're really close to them, maybe for you, it's important and immediate. So these have to be relative to your world and your priorities. Questions, comments? Okay. Well, let's go into this exercise together now. I want you to build a board that doesn't have to do with your own personal life yet. So we're going to go into our groups again. And in this instance, you're going to help this new couple move their to-do list into a personal Kanban board. So you're going to design a quick Kanban board. And here's you've got their example. This is called the Time Capsule. They've got something that is going to end. They've got a goal. They've got to move. So they're newly married. They have this beautiful little Shih Tzu fur baby named Tut Tut, and Arjun just got a brand new job, but it's in a new city, so they have to move. And all of a sudden, the dog isn't feeling great. And they've taken him to the vet, but he's got these medicines and these tests that have to happen almost every day. So they're kind of worried about that. And there's so much to do. So I've got some of the things that we just went over, and this is their to-do list, and they've marked some things done and some things are in progress. So this is just a way to get us into designing a board, thinking about those visualization, those design patterns we just looked at, thinking about that prioritization in your small groups. I want you to design a board for Arjun and Priya. Does everybody see how you can go to your different groups and use your own space to create a board inside your group? Okay, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So Ranjit, if you'll open the rooms again.
Opening it.
Okay. So I think the way we approach the problem is we read where Priya and Arjun are at, and it looks like taking care of their Shih Tzu who's unwell should be urgent and important. Another thing that they would like to achieve in parallel is the move, so we need to look at that aspect as well. That's point number one. The second is we observed that in those sticky notes, they had already mentioned in progress and done against some of those. We did initially think that all the ones which are in dark blue are the ones that are done, but we found an exception to that. There was one which is in dark blue but in progress. We let it be there, and yep. So we introduced a column called new, which is supposed to be the to-do items. We prioritized it based on what's urgent and important, which is tut at this point in time. And in progress, we pulled in all the sticky notes which were saying that they were in progress, and we did understand that the move has already started, so we pulled in one related to the move. And thanks to your hint, we did plan on adding in a value stream, but we were struggling to put that board in place with the weekly calendar, and yep, we didn't get too far. But yeah, the idea was to introduce all the activities around taking care of a dog, and having a checklist.
Great. Yeah, I saw that. And so that's really, if you put something in your to-do list, like, oh, give the medicines 3 times a day, it's hard to see like where you're at, right? That's where those value streams start to give us some benefit, because you can make that checklist, if you will, or maybe there's a different schedule. So I could see that you were going there with the calendar. So nicely done. No, but you didn't change any colors. I was wondering if people would change some colors. All right, group 2, tell us about your experience.
Yeah, so we first figured out which was the most important thing to be done for them to successfully take care of the dog, as well as work on the movement that they're going to do. So we came up with a grid where which is important and which is the least important, and which should be given like the second priority, and which can be accommodated. If not, also it's still okay to let it go. So we did that, and then we came up with what is done, what is to be done, and what is in progress. Like giving the medicines for the dog is like in progress because it's a daily activity. And next we were planning to come up with the like the calendar thing, but yeah, we couldn't complete it. So
yeah,
that's.
But you were getting there in your conversation. That's great.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, nicely done. So does using the grid help to organize your thoughts and critique each other's thinking about what is, what's important or what's immediate? Did that grid conversation help?
Yeah, I think it helps you to also retrospect what you've put there, whether it's actually needed or whether it still can be given a bit of a slack and you can probably pick it up eventually. So yeah, so that does give you you tend up I mean you tend to like give an alternative thought to it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think that
love that.
helps. Yeah. Yeah.
And one of my favorite product discovery coaches says when we visualize something, we allow others to critique our thinking. So once you get something visual and this is a great prioritization exercise for product owners because you are doing some relative comparing, right? You're putting your ideas out there about how it does, and then other people can critique that. And then you only have to talk about the areas that you disagree. If you've got a list of 20 items, and you only have 2 that you really disagree on, you can spend your time in prioritization or refining, only talking about those couple of items that you have difference of opinions on and unpacking that together. So the grids are a great way to prioritize time and activities and even backlogs. We're going to dive into some prioritization techniques in our January community of practice. You'll see the matrix is one of them. All right, group 3, real quick, what was your experience?
We have compressed the Kanban and the 2x2 grid, and we have one within the other. So we sort of agreed on the 4 boxes where we want to categorize each of these post-its, and within each boxes we had different statuses of to do, in progress, and done from left to right in that order. So we place the post-its accordingly in each of these 2x2 boxes. And one thing that came out is we did debate on few things, whether it's urgent or it's not so urgent and it can be delegated. And we noticed that we didn't agree on any of them being considered a waste. So maybe we were all too ambitious for Arjun and Priya to do everything they want. So uh, uh, but that's something that stood out. But apart from that, we were able to categorize all of them.
Nice. Yeah, I'd love for you to go a little further and actually build the Kanban board, because that visualization of what's in progress and in done, that's where you start to see those patterns, right? So there's a lot of magic in actually building the Kanban board and flowing the work through and recognizing some of those patterns. So when you start to practice this in your own life, I hope that you think about those visualization patterns and this prioritization, and you have, to be creative and share it with people. So we're about out of time. I want to bring you to our last section, which is our closing section. I'm going to summon you over here. And I would just really love to hear things that you felt like you gained, and also things that we could do better in this workshop. And all right, well, we're at the top of the hour, and I know it's evening for you all. I hope you all have a lovely holiday. I'll hang out if anybody has any questions for a few minutes. Thanks for coming and doing the workshop.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julie. It was nice.
Bye, y'all.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Merry
Julie.
Christmas. Happy New Year.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Julie. Nice working session. Bye-bye.
Thank you.